Welcome everyone to another ChronoLogic live stream, and this is a really cool one about Ethereum Alarm Clock and Chronos protocol use cases. My name is Sean Morgan. I'm the community manager for ChronoLogic. I'm here with developer Anthony, and Anthony, go ahead. You can get into all the updates that the community has been waiting to hear.
Thank you very much, Sean. Hey guys, and thank you for joining us again today. I hope you guys are not too worried about Bitcoin and the ETF effect on the way things are. Don't worry, just take your mind off that and let's get into the live stream. And I hope and I know you're going to enjoy yourselves. So going straight into the dev updates. Uh, First of all, Friday we had a new release of the Ethereum Alarm Clock dApp called the push update. You can get that at app.chronologic.network now. You can get the most recent updates, which include the DAI and the day token transfers natively in the dApp, which is the drop down which we mentioned, where you can select either DAI or day token to transfer the tokens at a later time. We also had the updates concerning the time node economics. We have better configurations now as we've been trying to make the system a little bit more efficient, and we've been achieving a little bit more with each update. Also, we had updates to the token allocation distributor, which were just some updates and fixes to the project as is. Remember that this allocator is supposed to connect back to the alarm clock and assist you to easily and readily dispose of tokens which you have in the contract. Sean, you want to take the blog update?
Sure. Within the last couple of weeks, Joseph has posted some really nice in-depth articles about how to minimize risk and maximize profits with time nodes. So we're about to go to mainnet, so it's really good for everyone to get practice with optimizing and securing time nodes on the Kovan testnet.
Yeah, so I really would recommend you guys checking this out. Thanks to Next Level and you, the community, there were some bugs which you guys pointed out, which we have been working on, and some are not bugs but sort of features. So you should definitely check out the articles. They would help you in understanding how your time node works and what the risks are for running the time node. So Sean, you want to take the DAppCon update?
Sure. Logan had a very nice presentation in Berlin, Germany at the DappCon conference. It was very well received, very cutting edge stuff about next generation of scheduling and execution markets. So that video is being edited and it will be released publicly on our blog very soon. The audit is very close to completion. You can check out the public link on GitHub, and we're just basically implementing the small changes that were suggested by the auditor.
Yeah, so we are aware that some of you would have given up hope because of how long it's been taking to order the contracts, but at least now things are getting more realistic, and the time to release the mainnet is closer now more than ever. You can visit the link to view the recommendations and the report from Bucky on the audit. Not too much in terms of updates from the recommendations, just a few minor updates, nothing critical. So we're definitely on the right path. So that's all for the updates. Time for us to delve into the main topic of today, which is the use cases for the ESC and Chronos. That's the Ethereum Alarm Clock and Chronos protocols. Before we go into that, just a quick recap. ESC is the Ethereum Alarm Clock, which Piper started working on a while ago. We came in and continued from where he left off, and we've been able to achieve a lot in terms of progress. Chronos is basically the EAC on steroids, which is the version 2 of the EAC, which adds in the conditional scheduling, which EAC does not have. EAC is basically the temporal scheduling. Now, about the use cases, we've been in scenarios where we've been asked what exactly is the point of EAC. I don't see myself using the EAC. It's only for me to transfer funds to an address at a later time. I can only think of contributions to an ICU as the only reason. Well, that's where such people, such cases, you've been wrong. So we're trying to just break down those use cases that come to mind right now. Remember that this is not all the possible use cases. These are the only ones that we are privy to, and there are more projects being developed every day. So there are more use cases developed, even developing right now as we are speaking.
That's right. Time is a normal variable that we all have to consider, but it's just not recognized in the same way on the Ethereum blockchain. So that's why we're solving a core problem, and there's going to be applications in a lot of different things as this whole ecosystem evolves. So can you tell us
Yeah.
how would this what is time conscious? What is a time conscious transaction, and how does Plasma require this type of innovation?
Okay. So time conscious transactions are just transactions that depend very closely on time. The Ethereum blockchain has time in form of timestamp, but the time is really just for decorative purposes in the sense that you can't really trigger anything based on that time. You can only check for the time, and it's not really useful enough for you to say um, plan ahead, sort of, or
Right.
to make transactions ahead of time. So time conscious transactions are just those that depend solely or a lot on time. Say, for instance, uh, sending funds in the next 3 hours and you're tired and want to take a nap, things like that. So onto the Plasma protocol, which is one of the scaling solutions on Ethereum right now. Some of the systems of some of the components of Plasma depend on time-based transactions. So you would have to send in some transactions after particular wait periods of times, which is which is time sensitive, and you could easily miss the transaction you need to do. Take note that this is at the low level of the protocol, which is part of the checks and balances which the protocol has to do to ensure that it maintains security, scalability, and all the other components, all the other features which it promises.
Yeah, so Plasma is a proposed scaling solution for Ethereum, and if they use our technology, that would be pretty big.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, back in EthCC Paris, we spoke to one of those working on Plasma, and they pointed out that once we do have our solution on the mainnet, that it would be a no-brainer for them to implement it as part of their protocol.
Great.
Yeah. So next is escrow type transactions. Sean, I don't know if you've had any experience with escrow transactions.
Yes, I used to buy and sell domain names a lot, and you don't necessarily trust the buyer, and so you put your money into escrow, and then once the transfer has taken place, then the funds are transferred. So I can definitely see, especially with Chronos, with event conditional scheduling, how this could be very useful. Also with traditional real estate transactions, mortgages where you put your real estate taxes into escrow on a timed basis every month or every year. Um, this is going to be huge. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds like you're very familiar with escrow transactions. So, for those who don't understand, escrow transactions is a scenario case, an escrow. You need an escrow when you're dealing with an unknown party, and therefore you can't trust to. send your funds or release your funds to the party before getting the service or the payment which you expect to get in return for the amount you're putting down. So what escrow is uh, in the smart contract world is a smart contract which you can send your funds to, and the other party sends their funds to, or sends the transaction to whatever they're supposed to send to, and then the contracts, after doing some checks and balances, allows each parties to withdraw their desired funds. So in terms of the alarm clock, this is very applicable with the time aspect of an escrow. So when you set up an escrow, you do not leave the escrow for eternity, else you just have your funds stock up in the address for eternity, which is quite pointless and is a form of DDoS in itself. So you'd have the alarm clock watching the address, at a particular time, that once it's due, it goes to the address and triggers a release, such that if either party has failed to partake or fulfill their part of the deal, it disburses the funds back to the rightful owners. That way, without even stressing yourself or having to go back to the escrow, the process already refunds you with what you've sent into the contract. You could also use it the other way, that if both parties have fulfilled their obligations, you get to withdraw your desired payment or your desired funds or your desired transaction using the ESC. So even in the present state of the ESC, you can already achieve a lot with escrow transactions.
Right, and that brings
Okay.
us to the next one, the governance type of transactions. Something that I'm just really starting to understand the implication of is that the EAC and Kronos, but let's talk about the EAC, is not just for sending payments. It's for like signing transactions and triggering smart contracts and stuff. So you could potentially schedule a vote if a vote only has a time window and you can't manually be there to vote for something. You could do that with the EAC.
Correct. So we do remember this. For those who have been around long enough, we were here during the DAO incident, and there was supposedly a vote, uh, which was well, which had a lot of question marks. In such cases, you could have set your transaction and left it, and when it was due time, it will have sent in your vote, and you will have known that you played your role in the process of the governance. Still, some time ago, a few months ago, there was the vote on the ERC 999, which is the returning of the parity funds. And the interest in that vote was obvious by the amount of um, ether that was voted on in that actual in that scenario. So those are those are just some few cases of governance, and there are still very much uh, other cases that have to do with governance. So next is auctions, and one good example of this is Gnosis. With Gnosis, there is a model where the price of the item or the price of the bid reduces, the possible bid reduces with time. Uh, so if you try to place your bid at the beginning of the auction, you definitely are going to set a very high price. And for you, that might not be comfortable enough. So you could easily look at the graph and say, okay, by this time, this is what the bid should be, and I'm very okay bidding at that. This is what the price should be, and I'm very okay bidding at that price. That's something that is directly achievable with both the ESC and Kronos.
Right. Yeah, something that Fabian Vogelsteller said to us in Paris was that it just makes perfect sense to use this type of protocol for triggering trading activity on decentralized exchanges and stuff like that.
Yes, very true. We're still going to get into that later on, but that is, as he said, it's a no-brainer. it's just the right thing to do. There is no other way to put it. At least for now, this is the best solution you have for such a thing. And it even goes beyond just the decentralized exchanges. It also there are still other scenarios as well, which is part of why we are doing this live stream to intimate you guys about possible use cases. So,
Yeah, for the next one, I remember interviewing the founder of NewCipher, and he was trying to explain that you could potentially schedule the encryption of data on the blockchain.
yeah, very true. So there is a model where you encrypt your data, but this is time-based. It's a kind of a time box encryption where you have your data encrypted and you dispose it into the network. Now, until it's time, that data should not be revealed, or whoever reviewed it will have to pay for it. And when it is time, the parties involved are on a first come basis for getting payment for revealing the data in question. So setting up a transaction which waits for that exact time and immediately reveals the data helps you get your what's it called now? Helps you get your profit or your funds from such a transaction, which I've actually seen implemented in other places, not only NewCipher. I can't remember the names, but this is something that is actually being used right now in the ecosystem.
Yeah, I think, as an overall technology industry, we're rethinking privacy and access to data. And I think that there are so many use cases for corporations and individuals who will gain access to private information on a time basis. When someone hits a certain age, or when a company changes ownership, or so many different examples that are actually triggered by a certain date and time.
True. Uh, a lot of things we do are very, very stuck or based on time, and it's good to be able to bring that realization into the blockchain, which doesn't really exist right now. So on to the final time-based use case, which is the contributions, which everybody knows, the ICOs. You want to partake in an ICO, you want to send some funds to someone, you can easily schedule the transaction and forget about it, go to sleep, and you would not have to worry that when it was time for the ICO contribution to begin, there were like 1,000 people out there sending transactions and your transaction wasn't able to go through, or you slept through the contribution. So that's the most
Right.
common one, but that's why we actually put it last. I intentionally put
Yeah.
it last.
And that's just from the users end. I mean, if you're launching an ICO, you can use our ICO starter to encourage users to schedule contributions, which has a host of benefits from that end of the ecosystem. So it benefits both sides.
Yeah, actually, Daniel worked on that. It's a nifty little button with which the ICO organizers can just have the simple button in the contribution page, and you can go there before the contribution is open and click on the button, and immediately you are able to schedule a transaction to partake in the contribution once it starts. And all those information will have been entered by the ICO organizers themselves. So this, apart from helping the person who's trying to partake in the contributor trying to partake in the ICO to have each free process of partaking or contributing in the ICO. It also helps the ICO organizer to have a pseudo idea of how much interest there is in the product.
Yeah, it really helps when you're trying to plan a fundraising effort.
Yep,
So
very much
about the
so.
multi-step transactions, I remember we interviewed Taylor from MyCrypto in Paris, and she gave the example of the ENS, that there's some kind of multi-step process for claiming a name, like .eth kind of domain name. But
Yep.
I guess there are
So
probably other things that work similarly. How does this work, Anthony?
okay, so the ENS is the Ethereum name service, and it's the DNS of the Ethereum blockchain. The DNS is the domain name service, which is your google.com, which is your netflix.com, which is your linkedin.com. The service helps you recognize those names and helps you fetch the right IP addresses when you want to visit those sites. So when you type google.com, you don't actually go to, there is no IP that is google.com. The DNS helps you resolve to an IP address, which is what is loaded on your browser. So that is what ENS is. It's basically having a name which has an address behind it. So once you type in a
Like
name, so for instance,
Anthony.eth.
yes. So it's once you send a fund or you send a transaction to that address, Anthony.eth or Sean.eth, right? It automatically redirects it and resolves it to the address, which myself or Sean might have configured the name to resolve to. So it's a process of setting this up is a commit reveal process and actually has 4 steps. You first have to bid. After you've bid for the name, you come back to finalize the bid after waiting for some period. And then later on, you review your bid after waiting for another time period, and then finally resolve the bid. Now, the reason it's like this is to ensure decentralization, ensure security, and give other people the opportunity to partake, basically in the process. Now, it's tricky because if you do not review your bid, you cannot get the name. So if it's a name you really wanted to get and you do not review your bid, you definitely you've lost out of that name. Now using EAC, you would be able to schedule all your transactions. Once you bid, you're able to get the address you need to do to send transactions to, and you set up your finalize, reveal, and resolve transactions. And then without you worrying about it anymore, all those transactions will go through, and you only wake up to having your ENS name configured and ready to go. So
Yeah,
that
I
is a
can
whole lot
imagine
of comfort.
that would be very valuable because I can imagine like pay.eth and bank.eth and some of these short, domain names
Yeah,
related are going to end up being worth thousands of dollars now or in the future. So if you can
true.
schedule all this to ensure that you own that intellectual property at least temporarily, that's a very
Yeah,
valuable service.
very, very valuable. I remember back when the ENS was released and names, uh, people could begin to claim and bid for names. There were cases where you have people put as much as 10 to 15 ETH on just one address. So it was really crazy. Uh, so yeah, another case is, or another use case or another scenario is the melon pot investment, which is the melon fund, which is also a multi-step transaction. It's a multi-step process. You have to set up the fund in about 2 or 3 steps. Uh, that's 3 different transactions, and they're all time-based. Not completely time-based, but you could schedule them even in the present state of EAC, and then be able to have your Melon fund ready without missing or forgetting to send your concluding transactions. So we've gone through 2 use cases so far. Just to confirm that you guys are not sleeping, can I have a one in the question box? I can imagine that I'm already boring you guys out and you're all sleeping right now. Oh, great.
No,
Thank
they're
you.
very excited for this section on subscriptions because this, whole ecosystem is about to evolve to incorporate this type of model, and we are playing a major role in making that happen. As it stands for the Ethereum Alarm Clock, you would have to pay for something up front if you wanted to like schedule it 12 times in a year or something like that, right?
Yes, that's right. So the Ethereum alarm clock is still very crude. Is very crude, which is why we had to develop a Chronos protocol, which is still work in progress. Um, To set up a subscription or recurrent payment, you have to set multiple, you have to schedule multiple transactions for those times that you need it triggered. But in Chronos, you would be able to have just one transaction, which then dissolves gradually over time. And as long as you keep refilling the transaction, the address in question, you'll be able to keep paying constantly, which number one reduces the cost of scheduling the transaction as against EAC or sending the transactions yourself, right? Since we all know that smart contract sending a transaction is usually cheaper than you sending it from an external address, right? And then it's also far more convenient to
Right.
go through the process. Yeah.
So
So,
potentially, I could use the DAI stablecoin once we go to mainnet. And my landlord's already accepting ETH payments from me, so I could schedule my next year of rent in advance. I wouldn't have to worry about volatility because I'm using a stablecoin. And then
correct.
if I move somewhere else, I can just cancel the ones that were scheduled for the future because you can cancel anything
Yes.
anytime, right?
And you get your refund immediately.
Right. Great.
Isn't it a wonderful world?
It is with landlords like mine.
Yes, it is. We look forward to a time where you wouldn't need to do anything so stressful beyond just scanning the barcode from a little device or the landlord's phone, and you're good. And
Right.
yeah, that's a wonderful thing to look forward to. So, a related proposal to the subscription or recurrent transaction is the 948, which our own Peter is one of the members of the working group. They do have meetings often, I think weekly, to uh, keep abreast of the ERC, which they're working to develop. Now, Peter being on the group also helps in the sense that we're able to link it back to the time node, as this most of the those working on ERCs that have to do with scheduling transactions or subscription or recurrent transactions don't really care about the excuse me, execution part of things, which is where the time nodes come in, which is part of why we had the EIP, which we spoke about last week, to have a standard for delayed execution. So the whole everything just links back to each other.
Yeah, all using ChronoLogic tech, and that's pretty exciting that it could possibly be a part of the Ethereum infrastructure at some
Yeah,
layer.
yes, definitely. We're also looking at the possibility of new projects coming into the system, coming into the scene, having less problem trying to set up their whole process, since there's already a standard as against before where everyone is on their own path and there's so much inconsistency, and therefore you have to spend so much and go through, and it's so hectic just to carry out a simple process.
Right. At this time in the live stream, I think it's a good time to tell the audience that you should be brainstorming your own use cases and putting them in the question box now, and we will talk about them when we get to the questions period.
Yeah, so for today's live stream, we wouldn't be having a question and answer. We will be having more of a discussion period where we get to discuss about use cases, possible use cases, what you guys think, what how you think we could make things better, what you think is another thing that we could add on to the whole thing, to the whole system as a whole. So I believe that should be fun. So you guys should start thinking about it. Okay, so Sean, you really wanted to speak about the decentralized exchanges. So we are there right now. The use
Yeah,
cases with the decentralized exchanges.
yes, these decentralized exchanges are growing all the time. People are leveraging the 0x protocol to launch decentralized exchanges. And these old ones, which are centralized, people are losing trust in them, and so it's a big trend. And and all of the leaders that we interviewed at these different conferences brought this up that you could schedule trading activity. And right now we have two developers working on the Melonport protocol. different implementation or integration of our technology, and this is very related to the 0x. So this could possibly be at the protocol level, or at a certain layer of this whole ecosystem of triggering trading activity, especially with Chronos.
Yeah. I remember back when it was Eta Delta back then. Now we all know it as Fuck Delta, or whatever is left of it as Fuck Delta. Uh, Eta Delta was the only decentralized exchange out there. It was a novel thing, and back then there was so much activity on all the centralized transactions. People hardly made use of Eta Delta because of the user experience wasn't so good. But since then, there's been Fork Delta, which is an upgrade of Eta Delta. There are the DEX, there are the IDEX, the DDEX. There's Radar. There's been a bunch of them, and we are seeing volume increasing in these exchanges. And the fact that these exchanges live on the chain allows full access and full control to for you with with transactions in the exchange. So, for instance, you could create your trades, you could cancel your trades. Right now with EAC, most of the things you could do are just time based. So, sort of the time limit losses, the time based risk. So, after a particular wait time, you would like um, for your bid to be raised, right? Or after some time, you check the loss or you cancel whatever losses you've incurred. But with Chronos, things get far more interesting, where you're able to, using the price, since we know the prices exist on the chain and you don't need an external oracle, you're able to trigger transactions like a stop loss, you're able to trigger a new trade, you're able to look for those arbitrages between the exchanges and move your funds automatically, well, not automatically but autonomously, without worrying yourself. So there's so much possibility. There's so much that can be achieved with this, and it's. I'm just getting pumped. So let me calm down a little. But definitely, the DEX is one wonderful use case, and yeah,
Yeah,
we look forward to more users in the DEXs.
yeah, we are like riding a mega trend with things decentralizing regarding the exchanges.
Yeah,
And Brendan was actually commenting about how we should talk about debt, and financial instruments like bonds and things like that related to scheduling. And here we are at the loan servicing.
yes. So we got you, Brendan. We have you covered. Uh, this is well, most of us have heard about MakerDAO. MakerDAO, the guys working on DAI and the Maker coin. There's a complicated process to getting your DAI. If you don't buy it off the market, you have to get your ETH, wrap it uh, in the MakerDAO system to WETH, right? Then you stake that. You use that to generate a loan to get your DAI out. And then to get that loan, you set a CDP, which is your collateralized deposition, which says that once the price of the DAI to the dollar reduces or reduces to a certain point, the position which you've set to get that DAI should be liquidated, and so you lose whatever funds you actually use to loan the DAI, because you could always refund the DAI and get your ETH back. So it's quite a complicated process, but with Chronos, right? We know we can't do much with EAC because EAC is just time based. You can only do time based things. But with Chronos, you have the conditional checker, which you can use to check for the CDP and then either raise the amount you have or reduce the amount you have in the position. You can also use that to check the state of your loan and know if it's a good time to get more of the tokens, or reduce the amount of the tokens you have. So you can use that, just that change in price, you could use that to set up a business entirely. So a good scenario is in the present state of things, we have the peer-to-peer transactions where you buy your coins, or for you exchange your coins for fiat, right? And then you're able to buy cheaper from someone and then sell cheaper, sell at a more expensive rate to someone. That arbitrage gives you profit. So this is something that you can then make happen on the blockchain with this whole process. Something similar applies to USDT, which is Tether. We know there's Tether on Ethereum now. So there's all sorts of things you can actually do in terms of loan servicing. Now remember, you can also, similar to the debt smart contract which we worked on, which I worked on some time ago, you could also use the alarm clock. It was designed to allow the alarm clock trigger the process of refunding in the debt smart contract. So there are lot of possibilities out there. Remember, these are just some of the possibilities that come to mind, and there are far more out there.
Yes, when it comes to debt instruments, there are a lot of different variables at play regarding different parties, different time periods, like loan servicers, lenders, and all the different parties involved within a loan. And there will be need for triggering, depending on different events and different time periods, uh, different things such as, interest rate changes, payment amount changes, additional parties added to a loan, or certain parties being paid back before other parties. And things can be very dynamic when you get into smart contracts. We also have our own, as you mentioned, we have our own peer-to-peer loan platform called Debt Smart Contracts, and people can check that out at app.chronologic.network.
Yeah. Uh, there are still more updates to be done on that. We haven't had an update on that in a while, but even in its state, it does get the job done. The next updates we're gonna have on that include the price checking and other things that make it a more tighter process and a more decentralized process. So I guess we should get into the discussions, and I can see you guys are really at it.
Yeah, especially Brendan. He was asking, how can we implement this within the conventional financial sector? And the conventional financial sector already has scheduling, and it works really well, and we use it all the time for paying our bills and stuff. Uh, what I'm looking forward to is when we onboard the whole financial sector onto the blockchain through things like security tokens and blockchain-based debt instruments. And then all of this technology we've been developing can be applied.
Yeah. Although I beg to differ that it works well, I would say it works well within its construct because we know it's all centralized, and yeah, tomorrow they can decide to print another billion another billion dollars of the currency, and there is nothing we can do about that. They just control the inflation rate as they like. So, as Sean said, bringing all those components into the blockchain is the future, right? Granted, we know it's going to be a gradual process. There's still a lot that has to be done to make it possible and make it a wonderful flow. But there is a lot that can that's still gonna happen with the financial sector as a whole coming to the blockchain. And we can see that already in sense that most of these guys already have their consortium, which they're building. Most all the big names, I don't want to name names, but they all have one consortium or the other. They say they're working on one blockchain or the other, and I'm sure you guys know about that as well.
Right.
So
Yeah, Brendan had a lot of good comments, and I think we addressed most of them. I answered everyone privately or publicly, depending on the nature of the question. Anything else you wanted to comment on, Anthony?
uh, okay. Um, I guess I would say you guys should get yourselves ready. get yourselves prepared, get yourselves familiar with the time node process, because it's coming nearer and nearer as each second passes. We are also doing our work, and we're playing our part to ensure that everything comes together and all the pieces come together to make a perfect, well, not perfect, but make as perfect as possible system. And we do appreciate you guys being by our sides all along, and we would keep working and keep updating you guys uh, as more information comes in. Thank you very much, guys, for coming around today. I do hope you had fun, and I hope I didn't bore you guys too much.
No, it's great stuff, Anthony. And if you want to watch this again to kind of get the get the information at a deeper level, you can. We recorded this. We'll upload it to our YouTube. You can check out the presentation slides on SlideShare. So just keep in touch on our communities, and you'll get the links for all that stuff. And there are the
Thank you very
links.
much,
And
guys.
have a good day, guys. Bye bye.
Bye bye.